Good morning. Well, it's morning where I am. Good evening, afternoon to wherever you guys are or whenever you guys are. My name is Jared. Welcome to my channel or welcome back. This is Keen Reads. Today I have a little bit better lighting, I think, and that's because it snowed overnight. So the light is kind of reflecting off of the snow and making it a little bit brighter in here than it usually is. So hopefully that's a little bit better for you guys. Today I'll be doing the newbie BookTube tag or BookTube Newbie Tag, so that hopefully you can get to know me a little bit better, know the channel a little bit better, and kind of get an idea of where I think I'm going to be going with things, and helping you decide if you want to take this journey with me. But before I get into the tag, I do want to just show you my dogs, because some people have been asking for them. So I'm going to show you Keen and Callie. So here's Callie. You saw her in the past video. Both of the dogs were waiting outside the room for me to let them in. And this is Keen. Hey, stay in here, Keen. This is Keen. She is the namesake for the channel. Now that we officially have all of our introductions out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So I took all my notes for this video on my phone, and then I realized I record with my phone. So I quickly just jotted down the questions here, and hopefully I'll remember most of my answers. So the first question is, why did you start this channel? So the reason I started this channel was because primarily I want to learn how to talk about books in a more robust way, a way that speaks a little bit about the insight that they've offered me, things that I took away from them, lessons I've learned, themes that I've explored, things like that, rather than just, yeah, it was a good book, or I enjoyed this book, which is something that I say a lot. So I would really just like to be able to think a little bit more eloquently and deeper about the books that I read. I'd also looking for a community of people who read the same books that I do. I don't know a lot of people in person who read, actually I don't think I know anyone in real life who reads the same books that I do. So the idea of gaining an internet community of people who enjoy these books as well is appealing to me. And then lastly, to get book recommendations. So I do have a large list of books that I'd want to read, but I'm always adding to it. So that's the last reason. Second question is, what are you going to bring to BookTube that is unique? So I think what I bring to BookTube that is unique is that I am a dilettante in that I have no formal training in literature. Whereas most of the booktubers that I follow who read the same books that I read are either went to school for English, teach English, are literature professors, they're writers themselves, things along those lines. Whereas I never took a literature class in college. I took AP Literature in high school, and that's the extent of my training. I am not a writer, and I'm generally not a creative person. So I think being able to say that brings a unique perspective to the books that I'm reading. I am someone who's kind of from the outside looking in, I think, and hopefully that brings a unique perspective to the books. Question 3 is, why do you read? So I read because I think that there's beauty in words themselves. I read a decent bit of poetry, and a lot of it gets lost on me, but I still just enjoy reading it because I like letting the words wash over me. I love a really good sentence, and I think this kind of goes back to my previous question in that sometimes a lot of the themes and things may go past me, but I do think I have an appreciation for the words themselves and the things that I'm reading, and I think that's really the core reason why I'm reading. I also love the images that they can paint. I love the idea of thinking a thought that I've never thought before, or imagining an image that I've never imagined before. All of that is what the main reasons why I read. Next question is, what are some of your favorite books? So I just have a small stack here. I just went through my library real quick and just pulled down some books that I know that I return back to over and over again. We'll start with 9 Stories by J.D. Salinger. So this is a collection of his short stories, and I think it's definitely my favorite short story collection. It has some of my favorite short stories in it. Probably my second favorite short story of all time is in here, Behind the Dead by James Joyce. I talked about this in a previous video, but Swan's Way is one of my favorite books. I've read it twice. As you can see from all the stickies, overall, I just really love his prose and the meanderings of his mind. Probably my favorite book of all time, the book I've definitely read the most, is 100 Years of Solitude. I think Gabriel Garcia's prose is just remarkable. Every sentence he writes feels like it has a weight to it. This next one might be a little controversial. It's Alice Munro. So Alice Munro was one of my favorite authors for a long time, and with her passing last year and some of the stuff coming up about how she treated her daughters, the way that she cared for them regarding her second husband and things like that, kind of put a dark image over her in my mind. But I still just love her prose and love her stories and the how understated they are and yet how deep they are. So Alice Munro's, this is love ship, or hate ship, friendship, courtship, love ship, marriage. But I have, I think, all of her short story collections on my shelves, other than 2. And then the last one is going to be Anna Karenina. So I read this 2 summers ago and just fell in love with it. I think it's the perfect novel that you can just read and become completely absorbed in and feel like you're right there with the characters. So those are just a quick summary of some of my favorite books. Challenges to making the channel. So like I said earlier, I am not the most creative person. So one of my fears and one of the things that kind of prevented me from making a channel for so long was the fear of running out of videos to make. But I've kind of got over this, and I have a couple ideas lined up for videos over the next couple months, but I guess I still do have the fear of, well, what happens then? What if I can't think of any more videos to make? I can always make hauls and things like that, but I do like to do special videos and things like that. If there's anything you specifically would like to see from the channel, just let me know in the comments. Next question is, when did you start reading? So I started reading probably around the age everyone starts reading. I read a lot as a kid, more than I remember. And the reason I say that is because when I graduated high school, my grandma gave me a scrapbook of all the pictures from my first 18 years. And at the time that I got that, I really wasn't reading that much, and I hadn't read much in the last 7 or 8 years. But the first line was, "To the boy who always read voraciously," or something along those lines. So that must say that when I was little, I did read a lot. I remember reading a lot of like Magic Treehouse books about dinosaurs. I never read the Harry Potter books, but I do remember, actually I read the first one. But I really remember loving the Magic Treehouse books, Goosebumps books, things like that. The way I got into reading this time around was actually the end of my senior year of high school. I was in study hall and my friend let me borrow Ender's Game. And I remember just loving it. And then from there, I read the rest of that Ender's Game series, got into Stephen King, and then from Stephen King, that was kind of my bridge to some of more heavier literature. And it's kind of been just my passion ever since. Where do you read? So I have a nice recliner here in my library that I like to read in. I'll read on the couch downstairs or in my bed sometimes. If my wife is out of town, I like to go to restaurants by myself and just read and eat food. That's one of my favorite things to do. And I think that's a pretty good summary of my reading habits. Genres. I think you should have a good idea of the genres that I read at this point. Typically more classics, both in the conventional sense and the more literal sense. So literal meaning like Greek and Roman classics, or Greek and Latin classics, and then conventional meaning what we usually think of as classics. So 18th, 1800s, 1700s novels, poetry, things like that. And then what is your book collection? So I think this is another thing that you've already seen. I've done a video going over it and plan to do another one later this week and continue that series going. I guess the one thing I would say about my book collection is that my goal in the long term is to have a personal canon of books that I feel are important to me and important to civilization. I have a list of about 500 books that I want to read in my lifetime that I've kind of compiled by looking at like greatest books lists, books that influenced my favorite authors. So I like to look at my favorite authors and read what books they read, and then read what books they read, all the way back to seeing this chain of influence, and eventually kind of having a personal canon. have kind of limited myself to Western literature, just for the sake of time. Just because I have so much other stuff going on that reading isn't usually my number one priority. And I think reading an entire like Western canon that I'll never do in my entire life, and then combining it with Eastern, I would just miss more works of the Western literature than I would want to. So I am limiting myself more to like the Western canon, but trying to make Jared's canon out of the Western canon. And that is the last question. So thanks for watching, and I hope at this point you know me a little bit better and can get a better picture of what the future of this channel might look like.